Welcome to the Harry Bridges School of Labor. Tonight's class is on reaching out to conservative workers through class-oriented trade unionism.
The point of this class is try and offer some insight into how we can reach not just workers who we might perceive as being pro-union or progressive, um, but workers who in the current climate have been considered the opposite, which I hope may illuminate some to understand that there is a lot more nuance to it, and hopefully we can uh, come to a better understanding of what our purpose is here to organize the unorganized, and some key advice that the labor movement has been given to work in even the most conservative unions, or among the most conservative elements of the working class. Because if we don't, they're going to basically be led by reactionary or conservative elements. And our purpose as militant class-oriented trade unionists is to try and organize all of the working class. And we can't surrender any part of it.
Once again, tonight's class is reaching out to conservative workers through class-oriented trade unionism. And we're going to give a brief overview of the state of the unions right now. Uh, Approximately 10.1% of workers in the United States are unionized. Of that 10.1%, public sector workers have a 33.1% unionization rate, which is almost a third, compared to a 6% union rate in the so-called private sector. The highest level of union membership in the US was 34.2% in 1945, at the end of the FDR era, when workers still had more power. And we have to identify some of the issues, and the general issues being unions are mainly subservient to the Democratic Party. There's mass disillusionment with the bureaucratic contract unionism model, i.e., yellow unionism or company unionism. There's a dog eat dog environment and the regression of wages and benefits that I'm sure everybody here has seen in the last 30, 40 years. The lack of militancy in the unions, etc. Union leaders and so-called labor lieutenants that serve the interests of the company and use the union to their personal benefit. And here's a quick image from the Seattle General Strike of 1919. And conservative conservatism in the American working class movement. Historically, since the beginning of the 20th century, the working class movement has been led by communists and or New Deal liberals. Union membership in the US reached its peak in 1945. However, with the advent of the Cold War, unions, communists were systemically eliminated from union leadership and replaced with business unionists who oversaw the decline of the working class movement. Today, union membership is a shadow of its former self, as we could see now with barely 10% unionization rate. Because of the close relationship with the Democratic Party, unions have become subservient to the state. What little militant action, i.e., the potential railroad strike last year, is quickly crushed. Generally, working class Americans are socially conservative in that they want strong families, good stable jobs, and the right to maintain their traditions and religions. The extent that politics plays a role in their lives depends on who they perceive as fighting for their interests. In the past, especially during the Roosevelt years, Democrats actually fought for the working class. and it's largely been absent in recent years. Over the last 30 years, the Democratic Party leadership, starting with Bill Clinton, has abandoned the working class, creating a vacuum filled by traditionally anti-labor elements. To top it off, most of the union activity today is run by opportunistic fake leftists. These organizers usually come from academia and tend to view the industrial worker in a negative manner. Academics have no interest in working with so-called backwoods workers, which is where we fit in. It is these workers that we need to reach. Many of them are objectively today's most class-conscious workers. Many workers vote Republican only for the sheer fact that the Democrats have abandoned them. And here we're gonna have a short video. This was on what was a labor organizing summit from the end of July, and this is Chris Smalls, president of Amazon Labor Union, talking to Revolutionary Blackout Network, and
And that's what it comes down to, organizing. I don't put labels on people, because that just puts us in categories right there, right off the bat. We already, oh, this one's on the left, this one's on the right. We can't talk about this, we can't talk about that. You can't do that when you're organizing 8,000
Yeah.
people at a warehouse, and the only red borough in New York City, Staten Island, is the only red borough. Trump Island, like you said, it's Trump Island. Trump flags everywhere, conservatives everywhere. It's there. The racism, the policing is there. The poverty is there. So when I'm talking to a worker, I don't care about their beliefs in politics. Their enemy is your job, your employer, your boss. What is Jeff Bezos? What has Amazon done to you today? What is affecting you in the workplace? And that's how we was able to build solidarity, because we kept it work related. And that's what we have to do in order to be inclusive in all these movements. You may not agree on everything. And of course, there's going to be ops all around us. The ops is here. They with us. The ops is here. But sometimes we gotta do with the cards, deal with the cards we're dealt. And unfortunately, when you're organizing people, you have to trust everybody. That's the thing. You have to trust people you don't know. That's the only way you build, is by trusting people you don't know. And your ideology is not going to align. But once again, there's nobody on this planet that agree 100% with somebody else. It's impossible. And that's what it comes down.
and with that, we're gonna break for our first round of questions and comments.
Hey everyone. First of all, we're doing amazing work here at ILWU. Don't dissuade yourselves. The whole world is watching us, not just the United States. I've seen that interview with Chris Smalls, but I actually must have missed that part. That part is excellent. It was very well said.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, since getting involved in the trade union movement, I've come to very quickly realize that just that conservative workers, they understand, they do have a level of, I don't know if you would call it class consciousness, but they are aware of how things are in the country. I mean, I've had conversations with people who consider themselves right wing, and I've had better conversations with them than people who probably consider themselves left wing, because of where they're at and what they understand, as far as just the system as a whole. So, I think it is important that we don't discount people just because they're conservative, or they might have an incorrect opinion on a social issue, that you might. But they are still reachable, and it's very easy to talk to them, especially on class issues. Still, I mean, that's what I've come to find out.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. I found when talking to more conservative leaning workers that they understand their class position better than the more liberal minded or more associated with the Democratic Party workers do.
I know it said that the rate of unionization for public sector workers was 3 times what the overall unionization rate is. I asked if that includes police unions.
I believe that number does, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out again, just Chris Smalls said the most important thing. You cannot ever agree 100% with anybody, right? It just does not work. And if you expect that to happen, then you might as well start a union of one, just you, yourself, and I, right? And from my experience, from trying to organize just my own workplace, right? Sometimes, they're kind of racist. Some of my coworkers, I'm not gonna lie, they're kind of racist, right? And I'm sure they hold racist views about me. But you know what? They're willing to help me organize my workplace. They understand that even, if they're willing to, understand and able to understand that at the end of the day, our boss is screwing us more than anybody else, then who am I to deny their help, right? Because if I were to start saying like, oh, this person's racist, this person doesn't understand, transgender politics, this person doesn't understand, all the different genders and gender identity and all that, I would never be able to organize anything. It just would not work, right? And so this idea of like ideological perfection is pie in the sky, dreaming. It simply does not work. You have to be willing to give some leeway. And I sound like a broken record, but I always harp on hammer and hoe, which is when, if there's a story about the CPUSA organizing unions in Alabama, and they managed to get former KKK members and black sharecroppers to work together, right? And did those two groups hate each other? Yeah, but they hated their boss more, and they could understand that they would be stronger together than than divided, by their bosses and by their racism. So don't find the things that can unite you and not the things that can divide you.
Yeah, so I grew up in a very conservative area, very tiny farm town, but a lot of the workers they traveled a little bit for some factory jobs outside. And one of the things that they would say, the reason why they weren't for unions is because they saw unions as being basically controlled by their companies. They, as you said, like with the yellow and company unions, they saw it as they were paying dudes a good amount of their paycheck to basically not be represented, to basically have these representatives of the company dictate what they need and want. So if I don't think that they're against unions in principle. I think that they've come to understand what unions have become.
Yeah, thank you. That has become a major issue in the labor movement in today's world. Unfortunately, company unionism, business unionism, yellow unionism, whatever you want to call it, has come to dominate the trade union movement in the United States. And on top of that, the AFL-CIO has worked with the State Department to exploit that globally as well.
What's the best way to navigate opposing all forms of racism, homophobia, etc., while still reaching out to more conservative and reactionary workers? Thank you.
Uh, that's a tough answer. When you're trying to organize workers, in most cases, it's probably best to avoid these topics. That sometimes they're not avoidable.
You have to pick your battles sometimes, or wait until you build up a relationship before you start handling those other topics. Find what the points of unity are for organizing initially, and then build upon that to tackle other things.
And I'll add an anecdotal story, which is something I did when in my workplace. Um, right, I'm in Staten Island, New York. And right now there's a big issue going on with the migrants that they brought a lot of them. A lot of them were sent to Staten Island, and they're popping up makeshift shelters all over the place. And one of my coworkers was talking about it, complaining about it, and I looked at him, and this was someone I've talked to before. I knew where they stand, and I knew they have a pretty good understanding of class. So I just went to responded to him like I was like, you know what? Why are we fighting? Why would we fight with them? Why are we pushing them away? What we should be doing is we should be organizing the migrants. He looked at me confused. I'm like, think about it. Why are they here? What happened that brought them here? They have the same enemy we have. We should be organizing them and fighting our, our state government, local government, even the federal government. And he stopped and he was like, you know what? You're right. Because ultimately it's class against class in reality. It's the working class against our bosses. It's the working class against those that keep us down. And we need to organize together to fight back and build our working class power. And with that, we're going to go back to the presentation. Class-oriented trade unionism versus business unionism. The current state of business unionism has led to a lack of enthusiasm from the union membership. Many view union leadership as nothing more than a middleman between the worker and the company. Abandoning this model must be a primary goal in our struggle. Union representatives, shop stewards, executive board members, etc., should try to avoid confusing language when speaking to the membership. You should be straightforward with them about the conditions in their workplace and what the workers are up against. We need to stress the fact that we all need each other on the shop floor. We need to break down the distinctions between trades and crafts. Though we may have different skill sets, we rely upon each other to get the job done. No one is better and no one is less than the other. That unity is important. Without it, we will be crushed. We need to support other unions on strike through justice and solidarity, as we will all working people. I can give you a great example. Our Mid-Atlantic chapter was out this weekend, and we were walking the picket lines with the nurses at Robert Wood Johnson in New Jersey. We need to talk with other members of other unions and foster unity and solidarity. I could give you an example on this quickly. I'm a public sector worker in New York City, and we were up in New York State for our lobby day earlier this year. And one thing we were up there for was lobbying for fixing our pension tiers. And the way it works is every craft, every workplace has a different type of pension. And when I brought up that instead of, trying to fix all our pensions for just us, we should be organizing all of the workers and fighting for a just pension system for everybody, I was looked at and told that's too much work. That's not something a union rep should be saying. That's something we should be organizing for. And we need to respect the laws of our union. Don't be a monkey wrench in the machinery of the union. Only speak the truth while minding your P's and Q's. We need to attend union meetings regularly and encourage others in our workplace to attend as well. We need to talk about how working people are always attacked by their bosses and that there has always been a struggle between the two. And we can't let this idea that we have a lot in common with our bosses take place. We don't. When we're in that workplace, the boss's goal is to get as much work out of us, paying us as little as possible. Our goal is to have decent working conditions and make a good living for our families. And we must agitate, educate, prepare, and organize. Preparing means to build up a buffer against the boss's tactics that workers experience in the course of the trade union struggle. And another thing we need to do, very important, we need to get away from the two-party system. We need to highlight these key points of unity when reaching out to conservative workers. Neither party serves our interests. The Democratic and Republican parties both represent two different wings of the bosses. They do not represent working people, no matter how much they may try to say they do. advocate for a labor party. Like I just mentioned, the Democrats and Republicans are two political parties for the bosses. We need a political party for just the working class. We live under a dictatorship of the rich elite. We need a workers' dictatorship instead. One party, two wings. One party, the party of money. Like I mentioned earlier, both parties represent two wings of our bosses, and they are both bought and sold for by large donations from our bosses. Both parties are pro-war and pro-imperialism. You know, there may be some issues like right now, you'll see a lot of Republicans fighting, talking about how we shouldn't be in Ukraine, but they're at the same time they're pushing we should be gearing for a war with China. We shouldn't support any wars for our bosses because ultimately they only these wars only benefit the bosses. They don't benefit the workers. And what they do is they pit workers of this country against workers of other countries. And we need a strong divided working class, not just here, but internationally. And we have plenty of money for wars, never enough money for struggling Americans. And that's just another point of the pro-war and pro-imperialism of the bosses. And this is a video from Judi Bari talking about
You know Google. It's that magic little
organizing.
box. You ask it.
What everybody
Timber
has been
workers.
asking me for the last 2 days is like, how do you organize timber workers? How do you organize loggers? How do you get loggers to talk to earth firsters? And the first answer is you have to like loggers. That's the first thing. And I already did because, you know, having been a blue-collar worker my whole adult life, the conditions of my life are actually more similar to them than to the privileged environmentalists in the city. So the espresso-sucking pavement dwellers, as we call them. But so being from a rural area myself and being a working-class person myself, I can relate for those reasons. But a lot of it really depends on your attitude. And the thing that happens is people who are more educated or who are from urban areas tend to really look down, especially on rural working people. And actually what I've discovered from a lifetime of being a non-achiever is that intelligence is not, it's equally distributed among the social classes. Dan Quayle is the perfect example of that. But there's a tendency of urban people to look down and consider the timber workers stupid, to talk down to them, to things like that. I've heard a 21-year-old college student say to a 45-year-old logger, "Do you know what biodiversity is?" And, you know, if you do that, that's the end of the conversation. So what I actually do is I just talk to people, that's all. I mean, it's been incredibly easy because there's nobody speaking for the timber workers out there. The wise use movement, the anti-environmentalists, those people are management. In fact, if you actually know them and who they are low-level management. They're fronting for the corporations, but they're not the workers. Nobody's speaking for the workers. The unions have mostly been smashed or corrupted themselves, and the actual interest of the workers is not expressed in the political spectrum in the timber wars. So what I did was, well, one of them is having some respect for them as intelligent human beings. Instead of telling the timber workers what to do, which is the other mistake environmentalists always make, I asked them. And I asked them to tell me about their working conditions and their lives. And the way I would meet them, by the way, is we'd blockade them. And, you know, here they are, and we're chained to their truck. They're not going anywhere. And, and that actually is really how I started meeting timber workers. And, you know, they're kind of curious about these people who are audacious enough to actually hike into the middle of nowhere in the woods and put their bodies on the line. You know, timber workers tend to be curious, and the cultural difference doesn't really bother them that much. You know, that's another object of curiosity. It's more just our attitudes towards them. So as I began to hear their stories, and I didn't even do this consciously, I began to give them a forum. I began to use my access to the locally radical newspapers to interview them and write about their conditions and what they told me. I use my radio access. I work on KZYX in Mendocino County, one of KBOO's sister stations, and I would, bring the loggers on and stuff like that. So by listening to them, by asking them instead of telling them, I really not only learned a lot of wisdom from them, but also began to build this alliance by advocating for the timber workers' issues in the community. And it didn't have to be save the trees. I advocated for workplace issues separately, understanding that it's the same thing, that the workplace issues are neither separate from nor subordinate to the forest issues. They're all part of corporate exploitation of the earth and the people.
And with that, we'll break for questions and comments.
Thank you. Thank you. If you don't know, I'm from Northern Louisiana. So there's only conservative people here. So I have to approach them in a specific way and let them know that I have a lot more in common with them than I do the bosses. Here's the thing I actually do. I talk to teachers and professors and staff of the school, like janitors, custodians. I'm friends with many people who are staff on campus, and a lot of staff knows me. More of the custodian class, not class, but group of people. Like, the thing is I smile and wave and let them know that if they want to talk to me, they can. I'm friendly. And then we discuss and I made friends. That's how I make friends. You just be nice to people. That's what I do. And just don't treat them poorly. And you make friends. And having unity in that would help organization, which is what I'm going to do with ASU, is have a teacher-student union with my campus and university and staff union. So that's what I plan to do, is to make organized campus. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on something she said when she was talking about those workers. She said, ask, don't tell. And I think that applies pretty good in this, in our work, because a lot of times we may think we know something that they don't know. But oftentimes what you'll find out when organizing people is that you end up learning more from them than you can teach them, and really it becomes a teaching point for your own self. So humbleness is a great thing to practice. So thanks.
Yeah, just a quick question as far as just tactics to get people in a union interested in going to their meetings, because I bring it up to local union members sometimes, and a lot of them just kind of scoff them off or just don't think they're important. So I didn't know if maybe people have like a common tactic or an easy way, to kind of get into that conversation with other members on just attending meetings and kind of being a part of the union.
Yeah, that's tough. Union participation union member participation in meetings is down, I think, just about everywhere. I think the main thing is when there's something very of extra importance on the agenda. It's easier to get more people out. One thing I noticed, especially if you start organizing within your union on particular issues, if you could get those key issues that you're organizing over, and you could get them to attend these meetings and pushing on these issues. I know for us, when contract time comes, attendance at the meetings goes up, and I'm in that window right now. But I've also noticed at the same time, it's contract time, and the attendance hasn't gone up as much as it has in past contract battles. So it's tough. A lot of it is the apathy, and people see the business unionist side of it, with the union leadership is acting more like an appendage of the boss than an appendage of the workers, and that brings morale down and tends to bring down participation in meetings. You have a 334 number. You have the floor.
I'm just wanted to say I'm glad you shared that clip. because as I get more involved in environmental activism, which is very important to me, it's clear that so much of it is just, I mean, basically all of it is just bourgeois dominated. I mean, I'm gonna say all of it, just, it's, how it is. And so she spoke to that and kind of talked about how you can merge worker issues with that. And so, yeah, I'm just glad you shared that.
All right. So I'm guessing your question is talking about unionizing these workplaces.
Hmm.
So first things first is you got to build relationships with these people. They're not gonna be open to any type of agitation if that's if they don't really know you, if they don't have any type of relationship with you. That's the most important thing. And then you're talking about electricians and pipe fitters. They're generally organized along craft lines. But if they're in one workplace, it's possible you could get them to organize cross trades if the workplace isn't already organized. There's great class-oriented unions like the UE that if you were able to build these relationships and people were open to the idea of organizing, maybe you could get them to organize with UE, and it could be an industrial union in that workplace. But at first, I would check to see if they are unionized along craft lines. You're in Indiana, it could go both ways. Historically, Indiana was a union state, but not so much recently. So, it's possible they're already organized. It's possible they're not. But the main thing is building relationships before you approach any ideas of unionization because they're going to reject you outright if you don't have a relationship with them first.
Yes, I thought like craft unionism was had been industrial unionism had replaced like craft unionism since like the 30s with the organization of the CIO, and like and mainly and that craft unionism wasn't very common anymore.
Well, there were some successful drives in amalgamating some of the craft unions, but largely most of you got the building trades that are all organized along crafts. That was one big thing with the railroad strikes. And there's the rank and file group within the railroads called Railroad Workers United, which is one of their goals is to united bargaining. They're all organized along craft unions. You have the electrical engineers, you have the electrical union, you have the locomotive engineers, you have the railway signalmen. They're all organized in separate unions along craft lines. And the ultimate goal should be to end craft unionism. We have more power together, and all being divided among classes weakens the bargaining power of each craft, and we are stronger together, and we need an amalgamation of all the craft unions into by industry.
Yeah, I just like to respond quickly to a question. As I understand it, you're encountering workers in a skills training center. I've been to these types of centers where employers pay their employees to come and get trained up. What I would do if I were you is I would distribute our labor paper. It's a fine, easy way to agitate, even if they're union or non-union, they can still read a paper. And sometimes you could talk to the facility administrator and ask them to put it out for you. There's usually places for literature already. So that's what I would say. Thanks.
Thank you. Another thing that I would recommend to do is try to befriend some of the people who work there. I have an idea for getting into a good relationship. Why not bring them cupcakes or something, or a gift of like food or something? No one can turn down good food. But yeah, just try to befriend people. That's what I do. and it works. It actually does work. I have friends who are staff in the university. It does work. Thank you.
My experience, it's really easy to small talk with people about their alienation that they find at their job on a day-to-day level. Where I bartend, and that's what I small talk with at least half of the people. For either sports or the alienation of their labor is pretty much always small talk about. And it's easy. It shows that you have an interest in their personal lives. And I think it goes a long way into building both class consciousness and being a friend to them. Thank you.
We're gonna go back to the presentation. We have a couple more videos in the presentation. We're not gonna get to all of them, but there's some videos of working class struggles. We're gonna start here with the UMW strike from Harlan County, USA.
Breaking organized labor. Organized labor. Organized labor.
Well, hell, I don't think they're in here for anything except break the strike here. They're for the company all the way.
Scabs wouldn't be up there if the state trooper.
I don't have a feeling one way or the other. Just have a job.
And why are you here?
Keep the roads open. Forest laws, keep the peace. Try to keep people from getting hurt.
Put your hands on me, Hall. Bailey. I know my name's Bailey, but you're a damn disgrace to the Bailey family.
Boy, this is a damn shame. Well, Bailey, you're a state cop. Ain't that a shame?
You ought to get a shot of something, get a shot of this baby hanging on. That's what I've been looking at.
It's the same diameter as this right here.
What's a scab? There's no healing for a scab, you know?
Yeah, that's some of their bones. That's some of their bones. The damn God draw that gun on me right there. That's how you saw a foot. That's the kind of goddamn wrong. Oh, God.
Hey, yeah, that's what it is. You shove people around. Go suck a while now, Frank. You two family. Hey! What the hell do you think you're doing? Next Go on, Sucky. Hey, go on. Hey, go on. Excuse me, have some in my hand. Goddamn bastard. Goddamn scabby son of a bitch. All you guys on this injunction, all 36.
And I can bring up one more video before we close it out. Go with a video from the ILWU strike of 2011.
This is Steve Zeltzer with Flashpoints Radio, and this afternoon we're talking with Dan Kaufman, who is the president of ILWU Local 21 in Longview, Washington, and their local is facing a major battle, in fact, a labor war over their right to have their union at the grain terminal. Also joining us is Jack Heyman, retired ILWU Local 10 longshoreman. Welcome to both of you on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank
you, Steve.
Now, Dan, why don't you talk about these? Now, Dan, what can workers do and trade unions and supporters who want to support your struggle?
Well, I think Jack said it best. I said what we're doing is we're representing all workers. This isn't ILWU. I mean, there's a lot of people in this country that are hurting right now. And you look at the downgrade of the middle class and the attack that's been happening here on the middle class. You know, I think Wisconsin said it clearly, is that I hope the big giant's waking up. But you know what? Here in Longview, the big giant is on its feet, and he's looking around right now. I think the people of this country got to realize that, you know what, the money's been going to the top 2%. The corporations and the banks have got more money than they know what to do with, and they want more money. I think the top 2% of this country is where the transfer of wealth has been going to. The other 98% of us better figure this out darn quick. And we better unite and stick together and take this fight back, because America is changing right now. From when I was a kid, when I was in my 20s, in 30 years, it has changed a lot. But the working people that built this country need to take back this country, and we need to stick together, and we need to do this. I think Jack's right. I think the labor movement is going to begin right here in Longview, Washington. Wisconsin got a good start on it, but Wisconsin didn't finish the job. And believe me, my heart goes out to those people, because there was hundreds of thousands of people there in Wisconsin in sub-zero degree days, going back and every day for 30-plus days, back. And now we got this same thing going on here in Washington. And I think everybody's looking at us right now. But what we have to understand here and what our plight is I got a 200-member local that's trying to battle 3 giant conglomerates. And they're trying to take the pressure, put it right back on the ILWU. It's about busting a union, pure and simple. But I think people just got to understand it. It's just not the ILWU. It's every union. It's everybody that works for a living has got to stick together and say, you know what, we've had enough. The middle class and the poor have been flipping the bill for this country for the last 30 or 40 years, and we've had it up to here. We are done. And I've talked to my wife and my daughter, and I said, you know what, I don't know where this is going to go. But I said, your dad could end up being in a federal prison, because what's going to happen to me is the ILWU is going to fight for its existence, and it's going to fight for its jobs, and we are not going to quit. There's no way that we're going to quit this battle. We're going to take it right back to these corporations, say, you know what, foreign corporations come into America and try to set the ground rules for American workers to work by. It's not going to happen here in Longview, and it's not going to happen with the ILWU or my membership here in Longview, Washington. No way.
I wanted to just...
And with that, we'll take a last few questions and comments.
Okay. So really what I'm getting from this class, which has been really great, is I guess for us being educators, being organizers, excuse me, can you hear me? Being educators, being organizers, is we don't necessarily want to push a message, I think as Henry Winston says, a message of diversity, but a message of unity. And that means you got to work with people that might not like you for whatever reason. But they probably don't even understand that. And that doesn't really matter. We really have to think of our class interest, whether they're aware of what a class is or not. So great. This has been an awesome class. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to say something about those videos. I compiled those videos with the idea being in mind that people could use these. Oftentimes, you can show a coworker a video. Maybe you're on a break or something. Especially like Harlan County, USA. You can see workers being attacked by the police themselves, and oftentimes in the shop you can hear people defending the police. Well, it's good to show them another viewpoint of how the police can act if people are starting to stand up. Additionally, the strike in Longview in 2011, the cops were beating Longshore members up, put a few of them in the hospital too. So just for that viewpoint, I think those are valuable videos. There's other videos in there about Ludlow Massacre, about the general strike in 1919. These are useful to show to people, to show them that there is a history already. This isn't a new thing. It's been, it's our nation's history. So I just wanted to make that comment about those videos, and I hope that people can use them.
There are certainly sections of the country that have been without a connection to class-oriented trade union membership. And as a result have been left to deal with reactionary elements who are there. They filled the void that was created by the McCarthy period. And now we have to deal with the creep of reactionary ideas that have taken hold. And we're having to rebuild the labor movement after several decades of deterioration, more than several decades. And we have, as we said before, you have to learn how to pick your battles. You have to keep your eye on the bigger picture. And sometimes that means putting up with some terrible things that are said, but knowing that in the future you can work with this person to help them understand things from a class point of view, and maybe help to bring them to a better understanding of the struggle that's in front of labor. And so that's really the key takeaway of this class, and how you should approach conservative workers is as understanding human beings, despite all the faults, that the bigger picture is more important.
And you can follow Labor United Educational League on various social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, as well as you can find the website for Labor United Educational League at www.lul.us, and the website for our publication, Labor Today, at labortoday.lul.us. And tonight we will close out with Talking Union by Pete Seeger.
Now, if you want higher wages, let me tell you what to do. You got to talk to the workers in the shop with you. You got to build you a union, got to make it strong. But if you all stick together, boys, 'twon't be long. You get shorter hours, better working conditions, vacations with pay, take a kid to the seashore.